Paramedic story time. I love you. If anyone hasn't seen any of the other stories I've posted on here, I'll give the same background. I am and have been a paramedic for about 10 years. My entire career has been spent in emergency medicine, responding to 911 calls and providing advanced life support for life-threatening illnesses and injuries. The calls we respond to range from inappropriate use of an ambulance to minutes away from death, and oftentimes, it's already too late. This story in particular is going to be dark. I apologize in advance if there are people that read this story and are affected by the nature of this story. It is going to be graphic. I'm not going to gloss over any details because the imagery is important. As awful as this story is, I want to make something good come from it. I want to use this story to preach a little and hope it finds someone somewhere and helps them. As stated above, this content may not be suitable for everyone, but again, I believe it to be important. It is going to be a long one, so set in, get comfortable, get a blanket or something warm to wrap yourself in. This is the one and only story I have a hard time sharing, and you will find out why. Over the last couple of days I have been ecstatic to see the responses I have been getting from these stories. I never thought people would like them, or respond to them in the way you all have. So I thank you for reading my stories and conversing with me in the comments. With all of that out of the way, this story is my Vietnam. I had been working for a couple of years as a paramedic after I graduated from school. The place I worked primarily was in the city, but our service area was the entire county, which is very rural. When you are in school, you go on ride-alongs. You practice your skills with your preceptors on patients, very similar to residency or internship. Your exposure to the job is what you get while on those ride-alongs. Sometimes, you get seriously injured patients and it's terrifying, because you sometimes don't always know what to do. You're still learning. But, you have your preceptor at your back to protect you from any fuck-ups, and guide you. Sometimes though, you don't get lucky enough to experience some of these horrible things. To some, that may seem like a good thing, but it is important to experience these as it prepares you for a time when you're all alone. There are a couple terms we use, called white cloud and black cloud. White cloud refers to a person, either student or professional, who never gets the exciting serious calls. The calls always seem to come when you are just getting off shift, or you left the area of where the call came in, and now another ambulance takes it, and this white cloud can follow this person for any length of time. Black cloud is the opposite. When I was in school, I was a white cloud. I got a few cardiac arrests, bad accidents, things like that, but nothing that ever really stood out as unique. So a couple of years into my career, this white cloud is still kind of hanging over me. That's not to say I hadn't had bad calls before that, I have, but it's not the same. The day this story takes place is Christmas Eve. I worked from 7 a.m. Christmas Eve to 7 a.m. Christmas Day. From what I remember, the day was pretty slow. Most people are with their families, not going outside, getting into accidents or causing mischief. I was working with a charge medic at the time, and a brand new EMT who was going through his FTO, field orientation process, was with us. A few of my coworkers had made a Christmas dinner that day, so we all had hot food to enjoy while we had to work and be away from our families. At our station, we had 2 ambulances there, with 2 crews. Myself, my partner, and our FTO, and the other crew. When night comes, if a call comes into our station, the 2 crews just rotate calls so that we get to sleep a little bit more. It was around 11 p.m. and I was sitting in the recliner watching TV. A call came into our station that required us to respond out to the county. One of the guys on the other crew, who was a friend of mine, was asleep in the recliner next to me, so I took the call. The call was initially for a woman who had fallen and hit her head, but was conscious and breathing. Due to the nature of the injury, we responded emergent. It was probably about a 15-minute drive to get to the person's house. As we are getting close, dispatch informs us now the PT is not conscious but breathing. As we approach the residence, driving down the street where this little development is, there is flashing lights everywhere. Sheriff's deputies, police, fire department were all there, with some even blocking the entrance to the street. For just a simple head injury, we thought that was pretty weird, and it set a weird vibe for the call. One of the deputies saw us coming and moved his car, allowing us through. Once we got through, this part of the street ended in a cul-de-sac with houses all around it. People were standing on their front porches around looking at what was going on. We arrived at the address. There is a vehicle parked in the driveway, still running with officers all around. The driver's side door was open, and there was an officer standing there and looking like he was talking to someone sitting in the driver's seat. I walked up first with my partner and our EMT FTO behind me. As I approach the rear of the vehicle, I see there is definitely someone sitting inside. There is also a man, middle-aged, in plain clothes standing in front of the vehicles, his lower half lit up by the headlights. He has his hands in his pockets and he is looking rather intently at the person in the vehicle. I walk up to the officer and get report from him. While the officer is telling me what is going on, I look at the person in the driver's seat. The person sitting in the driver's seat was a middle-aged woman, maybe mid-40s, 50s, sitting back with her head against the headrest, her arms hanging down by her side. I can visibly see her breathing, hear her moaning, but not talking. Her eyes are also closed. There is a bit of blood running down from her head, past her cheeks and down to her chin. There is also a small stream of blood coming from her nose. The officer tells me that she was inside with the family when she came outside to get something from the car. The officer says that the woman's husband, and gestures to the man standing in front of the car, came out to check on her because she was out here for a while. When the husband saw his wife bleeding, he figured she must have fallen or hit her head on something, so he called 911. The officer tells me the woman has not been responding to him. I attempt to speak to the woman. She does not answer me, but continues to moan. I perform a sternum rub to cause painful stimuli, and hope to get some sort of reaction. No reaction. I ask the husband if she has been drinking tonight, or if she abuses any drugs that he knows of. He says that she has had a few glasses of wine, but no drug use. At this point I'm thinking she has a head injury and potentially a brain bleed because she is not responding appropriately. I stand where the officer was standing in the driver's side door as I am performing my assessment. I can't see where the blood is coming from, so I figure she has a laceration or something in her hair that isn't visible. It's at this time that the officer comes up to me. He says, "We also found this in the driver's side door compartment." He produces a revolver. I look at the officer and look at the revolver. He looks at me and holds it out. I grab the revolver and flip out the cylinder, and at the same time thinking to myself, oh fuck. In the cylinder is one brass casing, with the primer indented, meaning a round has been fired. With this new information, and based on the bleeding, I assumed the PT had put the gun to her temple or something. The fact that she is still breathing and making noises leads me to assume that she missed, or the bullet miraculously bounced off if she held it at a weird angle. Due to the potential for significant head trauma, I decide that we need to place a cervical collar on the woman in case of spinal injury as well. I ask one of the firefighters to grab a collar out of our ambulance. I open the back door of the vehicle and get in behind the woman so I can hold her head stable while the fireman places the collar on. It's only when I do this that I see what really is going on. As I slide in behind the PT, I can see the back of her head. Something I will never be able to unsee. Looking at the back of her head, I see a grapefruit-sized hole. With my flashlight I look at the hole and it is almost empty, except for a large piece of skull that is floating on top of a blood and brain soup. I look up, and on the headliner of the vehicle is a 2-foot in diameter halo of blood and brain painted above her, with tiny pieces of skull stuck into the fabric. I look back at the hole. It is a chilly night, so I can see heat vapors coming out of the hole, similar to how you would be able to see your breath on a cold day. I look out the vehicle at my partner and I say, "We need to go. Now." Either the look on my face or his sense caused him to peek inside the vehicle and see what I was seeing. His eyes grew wide, and all he said was, "Holy shit." Our EMT FTO quickly went to the ambulance and grabbed the stretcher and backboard. Up until this point we were taking our time carefully getting her out of the vehicle, but now, carefully and slowly turned into, just get her out of the vehicle. Our EMT also grabbed me a few large trauma dressings and gauze wrap. I placed the trauma dressing over the hole, and wrapped the ever-living shit out of it around her head so that when we moved her onto the stretcher, nothing would spill out. With the help of the fire department and police we moved the woman onto the backboard and put her on the stretcher. The whole time the husband has been standing at the front of the vehicle watching, not understanding what has happened. As we get the woman on the stretcher he comes over and I can see he now has tears on his face. He bends down, kisses her on the cheek and says, "I love you." We quickly get the woman in the ambulance. Due to the woman's injury, her cerebrum, largest part of the brain, is almost completely gone, meaning she has no motor function, no muscle tone and no cognitive abilities. Her brain stem, however, is still intact. The bullet missed it. The brain stem controls the body's autonomic functions like respiratory rate, heart rate, and blood pressure. Due to this, when we moved the woman to the stretcher, her tongue fell against the back of her oral airway, causing a blockage. I knew immediately this was going to happen, so I had my partner set up the intubation supplies for me. In the ambulance, I placed the laryngoscope, bladed device used in intubation, into the patient's mouth to move her jaw and tongue forward, opening her airway. I see the hole on the roof of the woman's mouth. I slide the endotracheal tube through the woman's vocal cords into her trachea. This gives us a secured airway so we can ventilate the patient. My partner uses an intraosseous needle to obtain vascular access. Does the same thing as in 4, but it goes in the bone, and medication and fluids are absorbed by the bone marrow. I place the PT on the cardiac monitor, check her blood pressure and oxygen. At the time I thought it was the strangest thing. Her blood pressure was actually good. Her heart rate was normal, her oxygen was good, and her cardiac rhythm was normal. We start transporting Emergent to the hospital, and I give them a heads up activating the trauma team. After the call, we went back to the station to restock the ambulance and clean up. That's when I saw all the bits of bone and blood on my pants and shirt. Luckily the charge medic let me go home and take a shower, and put on a new pair of clothes. After I changed, I went back to work, and the rest of the shift was uneventful. I learned that the next morning around 9 a.m. the family had decided to remove life support, and the woman passed away. For many years after that call, I didn't notice a change. I kept doing what I do best and never really thought I had been affected by it, until I realized I was. A couple of years ago I had a bad relationship that made me start thinking about myself, and how I am. It was something that was always there, but I never really thought anything about it. I just thought it was my personality and who I developed into as an adult. I realized how angry I always was. I was not a mean person, but very simple stupid things would set me off, and I had a bad temper. I was very cynical of the world, still am, and what I thought was a stomach problem, I started thinking maybe it's anxiety. I decided that I want to figure out what caused me to be this way. I wanted to figure out why I think the way I do, why I act the way I do. So I decided to go see a psychologist. After many months' visits, my psychologist came up with the PTSD diagnosis. I hated it at the time. I hated being categorized as someone with PTSD. It didn't make sense. I can handle anything, nothing bothers me, but during those visits as we conversed, the one thing that kept coming up was that call. I didn't realize how much it actually affected me. How much of a wall that I built to shut everyone out and not see who I really am, to protect myself. The more I thought about it, the more I came to realize that it probably makes sense. The reason I tell this story the way I do, with the graphic detail, is because I think everyone needs to understand in its entirety how mental health not only affects a single person, but everyone around them. Like I said, I'm going to get preachy, so if you don't want to read past this, I understand, but I urge you to. This is something we talk about at work quite a lot. And there are several coworkers on the ambulance even now that I talk with about this stuff. One of them, if not number one cause of death in first responders, is suicide. If you are someone who has thought about or attempted suicide in the past, you need to know that taking your life doesn't affect only you. You may think it will be better this way, but I assure you, it will not. People often say how selfish suicide is, and it's true. Because once you are gone, you have no idea the amount of lives have been impacted by you. If you don't think this is true or that no one will care, maybe you need to go back and reread my story, because I guarantee people care. I care. So find someone, anyone to just talk to, be honest, let them know how you are feeling. I know it's hard. It was for me, but it does get better. You just have to try. So if anyone you know has or does struggle with mental health issues, reach out. Just be an ear. You don't have to try and solve the problem, but just listen. If you listen, you just may hear something that can help save someone's life. And if you struggle with mental health issues and think there is no one for you to talk to, you're wrong. It can be a professional, it can be the person you consider a close friend or relative. If you feel like none of these options work for you, or that you are considering doing something dangerous, go to your local emergency room. Call 911 because that is what we are all here for. Police, fire, EMS, ER staff. People may not think of these people to call when you are having a mental emergency, but I can tell you firsthand that we deal with this a lot more than you think, and we are trained in how to deal with people in these situations. All of us. Even if you don't know what to say. If you even just make the call, it will get things started and hopefully you find the help you deserve. This number is for the National Suicide Hotline, 1-800-273-8255. You can call from anywhere, anytime. They are available for anyone in suicidal crisis or emotional distress. There is always someone to talk to. Thank you all very much for reading and the support you have shown to me and my stories. If you enjoyed this and want more, let me know. I'll try not to tell only the dark ones. I love you all.